Hello and welcome to Politics Today, and in this programme we shall be asking a very important question. Is our Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, the most hostile Foreign Secretary to Israel in British history? And in this programme today I'm joined by Alistair Scot from Vision for Israel and Revelation TV, and together with Melanie Symonds, the editor of Heart newspaper. So welcome to the programme. It's lovely to see you back on the programme, Melanie. Thank you for all you do. But just share with us the exciting news that a new edition of Heart newspaper is out, the August and September edition.
Thank you, Simon. It's been quite a battle actually on various fronts, for financial, spiritual, but we got there by God's grace, and I'm grateful to people who supported us and prayed and donated, to be frank. So on the cover we've got, which I really felt the Lord wanted, a wonderful article about how the hostages found faith in captivity. And I felt that it's probably going to provoke some churches, just because it's about Israel. And I felt that very much the Lord wanted his people front and centre, and he's sort of saying, go on, see what you think about this. You know, these are the hostages. They were cruelly taken, horrendously treated. Some of them have gone back to their God and found him in that hell, in the Hamas tunnels. Then we've got other articles on the state of Britain, of course. We've got a big article by Reverend Jennifer Abigail Lawson-Wallace about how the enemy has basically taken control of all the gates, the significant entry points of the nation, and it's not too late to pray. We've got Chris Wickland's a recent prophecy about time to answer Boyle and what's going to happen, the dangers of civil war and civil unrest, of course. We've got a potted version of the wonderful speech Danny Kruger gave in Parliament recently. Brilliant. And we've got a big double spread on the dangers of AI and a Christian response. Very
good. So an action-packed newspaper. I expect nothing less, Melanie. Well done. And Alistair, it's great to have you back on the programme. Firstly, thank you for the wonderful work that you do here on Revelation TV with the persecuted church, but also with Prayer Time Live. You have so many hats, including working for Vision for Israel. So share with us what you've been up to recently, particularly regarding Vision for Israel, who are really providing vital humanitarian aid and assistance to Israel through this wonderful ministry, particularly at this very critical time.
Well, it's the most challenging time, I think, for Vision for Israel as a ministry, because not only is it still providing the shelters all around the country, because the war is still going on, as everyone knows, and there are various people that haven't got the shelters near enough for them to get to in a rush. But I think the biggest challenge is not only providing shelters, but it's reaching out to the families who are out of their homes. They've been moved, and homeless places, and helping them with finances and food and so other things. But I think the biggest challenge for Vision for Israel at the moment is actually getting the true message to the church. I mean, we know we do that here in Revelation, or try to do that here in Revelation TV, because the major TV stations are just basically telling lies, or a very biased view of what's really happening in Gaza and around the Middle East generally. So the challenge is in the church, because even the church generally seems to go with the biased view of a BBC or ITV or whatever, rather than research and find out what is really the truth. So in Vision for Israel, not only in this nation, but in America too, it's taking that message of what is really happening and reminding people about what was October the 7th all about. People have forgotten that was the start of the problems in Gaza. And it wasn't Israel going into Gaza. Gaza started by rockets and their Hamas terrorists coming out and attacking civilians, and we've forgotten that. It seemed to have been forgotten after about day 3. So we have to remind people that is what it's all about. It's not about civilians starving, and not about civilians being attacked, not about civilians being shot. It's about trying to free Gaza from that Hamas terrorist control.
Absolutely. So actually dates back to about 2007 when Hamas decided to carry a coup against Fatah and the PLO and literally throw them off buildings and take over the Gaza Strip, and then implement Sharia law through a totalitarian style terrorist government that we see that's just aimed to destroy Israel. And of course that's where the problems start. So thank you. We need to put that in context. And Melanie, talking about the issue of Israel, I can't ignore and I want to get my words completely right here, so I'm having to refer to my notes, that what we've seen over the past week is our Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, condemning Israel in the most horrific way. He describes Israel's actions as appalling and dangerous. He has absolute disdain and hatred for Israel, and he's even accused IDF soldiers of deliberately killing Gazan children with their hands being held up for food, wanting food and aid, which would no way is that backed up by any proof. He's just saying what he feels and what he sees. But at the same time, this is damaging British-Israeli relations, and it's damaging Israel's eyes in the world. And we know that our government, through David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, is really turning very, very hostile and very nasty to Israel. Share with us your thoughts on David Lammy's comments towards Israel over the past week.
Well, I mean, if we didn't have the Lord and know the answer, it would be profoundly depressing and distressing when one hears this stuff on the news. That's why I love being able to come to Revelation and to meet like-minded people and to know that we're sharing with like-minded viewers. Spiritually, it's desperately dangerous. I'm horrified when I hear what David Lammy says, and I think I'd like to think that he knew better. I suspect he might, but he's not bothered. But it also tells on what the Foreign Office briefing him, because he is just doing knee-jerk reactions to the very distorted images from the mainstream media. And we've known, those of us who get alternative Israel channels on Telegram, etc., we've known that these photos of children holding out their hands for food are faked, completely faked. And the BBC is still producing them. There was a picture of a skeletal child, apparently on the cover of the New York Times, this dear little boy who's had cystic fibrosis. And
he's the main boy they're using to say, look, the children in Gaza are starving, and it now proves out that that was a fake.
Well, is the BBC going to apologise?
Of course.
For instance,
they've got the image up there on
exactly,
screen now.
And his mother's quite well fed, and his little brother's perfectly normal and healthy. He's been blurred out of the picture. Honest reporting show that. So we've had horrendous lies going on, and yet David Lammy seems content to repeat them.
Yeah, but isn't that the real danger when we're being lied to by national media, when we're being lied to by politicians? We're living in a generation where we're living post-truth. Truth goes out is a casualty of war, goes out the window. We're not interested in truth. We're not interested in verifying a story. We're not looking at the authenticity of this story and these facts. We're just going to put it out there because it's emotional and this might sell some more newspapers, or we'll actually then put Israel under huge pressure, and this is what we want because it fits our political narrative, which I think is very, very dangerous for society. It's very dangerous for journalism, and it's very, very dangerous. We're living in a society that no longer cares about truth. And on that issue, Alistair, I mean, surely the very dangerous rhetoric that we're hearing from David Lammy, he's using against Israel, he's using words like grotesque, sickened, appalled by Israel's actions. Surely that is no way for a statesman to talk about another democratic ally. I repeat, the only true democratic ally that Britain has in the Middle East. And yet he decides he wants to use these rhetoric that inflames hostility and shows his complete disdain for Israel. Share with us your thoughts on the language and the rhetoric that our Foreign Secretary is using against Israel, and how this is really not statesmanlike.
It's been really worrying listening to him speak against Israel in the way he does, and because he's supposedly a born-again believer too, which always worries me, because you know, if you read your Bible, you wouldn't speak like that. But one thing I've noticed, it tends to be with the reporters as well as politicians, when they speak about Israel, they're so disrespectful. These guys that they're talking about are leaders. They are MPs or you know, part of the Knesset there, and yet they can speak of them as if they are, I don't know, it's third world or not even that, just no respect for them. And it worries me when the foreign minister, or the foreign secretary is his official title, is speaking against an ally. You know, it's one of the closest, the only democracy in the Middle East. They're the ones that help us in so many ways with intelligence and all the rest. And to speak against them in the way, and it's reflecting the government, because he is the foreign minister, he's the foreign secretary, so he's supposedly speaking out of the cabinet. You know, he must be getting some kind of advice and counsel from the rest, and yet the words he's using, they are definitely aimed at, well, I suppose the supporters that Labour Party have, who are very much anti-Israel. But as a nation, we need to be praying that this turns around, because it's just not right. It's not even truth, as we've both made the point of this already, that these are lies being portrayed by our main terrestrial TV stations, and you really do need to, and I would say this, if you're watching, David Lammy, research before you make your proclamations, because most of the things you're saying are based on untruth, and as a politician, surely, and as a Christian politician, you should be standing for the truth. So it worries me that he can be so hostile in his words against a nation that is our friend, you know.
Absolutely. Also, I think an important one to bring up that we only had 2 weeks ago, another October the 7th, this time against the Druze in Syria, a place called Sweda, which was an absolute massacre. Appalling atrocities were committed by government forces belonging to al-Shara, the president of Syria. And really, we don't hear too much coming out of the Foreign Office. We don't hear the condemnation of this new Syrian regime and what its forces have done against the Druze, who have faced their own massacre. And if it wasn't for the Israeli intervention, that would have been an even bigger massacre against the Druze. And yet we are still pumping millions of our taxpayers' money straight into this regime in Syria, which hasn't been tested to see whether al-Shara is a true democrat. And he's changed his political and spiritual allegiance away from the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda to a kind of moderate position. I think the fruit really is in what his government is doing, and to have his armed forces carry out massacres and atrocities against the Druze, and our Foreign Secretary silent on this one, shows you where his moral compass is. And I just want to bring you on board on this one. So if we look at David Lammy, so it's almost just over a year now that this new Labour government has been in office. Does feel like a decade since they've been in. But even from the very start, that David Lammy, when he was appointed our new foreign minister or foreign secretary, he's used his position to attack Israel. Firstly, he reinstates funding for UNRWA that the Conservative Party suspended, which is the United Nations Relief Works Agency. And this is the UN agency that's helped build up Hamas's terrorist infrastructure, terror tunnels, its rockets and missiles to destroy and attack Israel. It's made the leaders of Hamas multi-billionaires, not millionaires, but billionaires living in luxury in Doha and Qatar. But also, according to Jake Wallace-Simons, who writes brilliantly for the Daily Telegraph, there were 1,200 members of UNRWA that carried out the massacre against the Israelis and foreign nationals in southern Israel on October the 7th. Yet he's reinstated that funding. He's also then given the go-ahead to the International Criminal Court in The Hague to bring about war crimes against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. These are alleged war crimes, without actually putting Hamas in the dock. And then on top of that as well, he has also limited arms sales to Israel when Israel was facing a multi-front war with Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Also, Israel was facing Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and militias in Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, and then also being targeted by ballistic rockets by the Iranian regime at a time when Israel was surrounded by enemies who wanted to destroy her. David Lammy decides to actually cut military supplies to Israel when she needed it. Just share with us how he's really making a career out of being hostile to Israel, and that does not put him or our nation in a great position before God.
Because what Lammy is doing, he's just playing to his domestic audience. There's just no doubt about it. And that is what Keir Starmer is doing, and very much Angela Rayner, because Angela Rayner promised her constituents a Palestinian state to get elected.
And didn't she have that meeting just before the election with the leaders of the Muslim community saying, I will give you Gaza, we'll give you a ceasefire, we'll do everything you want, just vote for us.
Yes, exactly. Because they were obviously terrified they would lose their seats to the pro-Gaza candidates. So it's all for the domestic audience. I was listening to Colonel Richard Kemp on the way up, being interviewed by Jonathan Sacerdote, and that cheered me up. He was interviewed during the 12-day war against Iran, and he said he'd worked in the Cabinet Office, of course, during the Afghanistan war, and he knew that at the time Tony Blair and Gordon Brown got it. They understood Israel's position. And anything they said to the contrary was purely for the domestic audience. And he thinks that Keir Starmer knows as well, but he is still doing this for domestic expediency. He doesn't really believe it. We have to thank God that we have Donald Trump in office, and also to some extent, say, Viktor Orban in Hungary, because he is also, I think he's left the International Criminal Court of Justice in The Hague over its stance against Israel. And there's a thriving Jewish community in Hungary as well. Yeah. As for Macron, well, just awful, his stance. But he's also doing this for his domestic audience, because these politicians have a huge, well, here and in France and in other European countries, they have a large Muslim number of population, and therefore they are terrified of presumably losing their seats to more extreme elements, and therefore they are throwing them these bones of condemning Israel. So we are in the position where His Majesty's government, which used to be about, well, in theory, probably never was, but about truth and integrity, etc., is, and as leaders of a Christian nation, is bowing down in the face of a religion which has in its sacred book that you must kill Jews.
I think that's where we are, though, Melanie, isn't it? And also what really depressed me last week was seeing David Lammy's address to Parliament last week, where he's announced that he was going to give an extra 30 million of our taxpayers' money to UNRWA, knowing that UNRWA was responsible for the massacre of October the 7th. Certainly 1,200 employees of UNRWA carried out the atrocities, which were crimes against humanity, against Israelis living in southern Israel and foreign nationals as well. And yet there's no checks and balance put in place. It's just a blank check given to, effectively, Hamas, who are a genocidal terrorist organisation. So we can actually say that our government and David Lammy is supporting the political and strategic objectives of an Islamist terrorist organisation, Hamas.
And the thing is, our government and the previous government have said quite clearly that Hamas are a terrorist organization. And it was proved that, like you say, 1,200 of those terrorists that came into Israel and committed terrible death and murder and everything else, they were proved to be UNRWA workers. And yet, and our previous government actually suspended the payments to UNRWA, realizing that this is a terrorist organization that is being used by the United Nations in so many ways. And we're funding them, by giving this money back to them. That means we're funding a terrorist organization, which even our government proclaims to be a terrorist organization. So I don't understand how a foreign secretary can actually do that without researching or not accepting the proof that is being out there. It's not like it's an allegation. It's been proved that these guys were working for United Nations, they were being paid by the United Nations, and they were attacking civilians out there in Israel in a terrible way. And the stories we know, we don't even want to go back to. I don't even want to remind myself of them. They were so horrific. And he's now funding them just as much as Iran funds the Hamas organizations. But by giving the money to UNRWA, they are funding these people who are still working for the United Nations. It's crazy. I can't understand. I mean, there was a time where I was thinking, I'm so glad it seems like they've silenced David Lammy, because he started off in this terrible anti-Israel slant, and then he went silent. I thought he's obviously had counsel, keep him away from a microphone. And then suddenly this week it's gone crazy again. Oh,
absolutely. And Melanie, I have to ask you really also what David Lammy said in Parliament last week, and what this has really sent the alarm signals off for me. He says he wants the Israeli and American aid distribution centres to close, and for the UN to be providing international humanitarian aid to those in Gaza. So effectively what he means is he wants Hamas to control these so that Hamas can profiteer from the international aid that helps fund its military campaign against Israel, but also a means of demonizing Israel as well. And it's quite easy then to stigmatize Israel, saying that Israel is deliberately carrying out a policy of starvation with the Gazans, when we know that the international aid is not being given to the Gazans in need. Because the UN is not delivering it, but it's so easy to blame Israel.
Yes.
So surely our Foreign Secretary should actually understand this and get his facts right before he opens his mouth.
Yes, and while Alice was speaking, I was thinking about what briefing is he getting from the Foreign Office. It reminds me of Yes Minister, where the Foreign Office has a policy of always being against Israel, and therefore they will just tell David Lammy what they want him to know. And David Lammy will be parroting this, basically, and helped by the mainstream media.
Okay, that raises a bigger question. Do we have members of Hamas actually working within the Foreign Office influencing David Lammy? Because his policies he's pursuing are exactly in line with Hamas's political and military goals.
Yes, well, he is intentionally or not, he is parroting, he is saying what he and the BBC are believing and quoting what Hamas is saying. I mean, the BBC always says the Hamas-run health authority says, and they make that the main story, and then they say, oh, Israel denies it. But what is really interesting, this dynamite leaked email has just come out, which the Spectator has published I think last night, about a leaked BBC email from the bosses to the news departments telling them the policy, the way they have to speak about the Gaza Humanitarian Fund. We've also covered this in the New Heart and the fake ceasefire in Syria. But as you say, no one is thanking Israel for what they've done to save the Druze. You know, they're portrayed as bloodthirsty killers when they've gone and risked their own lives to help the Druze in Syria. Now you've got the Druze in Syria saying, we want Israel. However, this leaked email sent to BBC staff last Friday, it says that the argument over how much aid has crossed into Gaza is irrelevant, and it instructs staff that we should say the current distribution system doesn't work. It explicitly favours a particular explanation of suffering in Gaza, one that blames the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which, as we know, has been established with the US and Israeli cooperation. And even overnight, I've seen something from a British researcher and former Special Services soldier called Andrew Fox, who, like Colonel, kept in Israel, and he said the lies are so outrageous. He's sent a picture of little girls waving at their Gaza humanitarian aid point.
But very quickly, we've got 5 minutes left. Give us your thoughts on these 1,000 trucks that are stationed nowhere in northern Gaza, not going anywhere, as we can see on screen, where the food is actually rotting and the UN actually refuses to actually distribute this vital food for the Gazans. Give us your thoughts on this, because this is what David Lammy should be putting pressure on the UN to ensure that this food aid is delivered, and the Israelis are happy to deliver that. They provided safe corridors for the UN to drive their trucks down to give the aid, but of course it's all massing up here and not being given to them, and instead Israel is accused of starving Gazans.
Well, it really, I mean, someone should start a campaign for justice for Gazans. I feel compassion for them, apart from the murderous people who condoned the 7th of October and the ones who cheered them on, there must be some decent people there who are genuinely suffering because of their vile terrorist government. And I'm just grateful that there's an alternative led by Abu Sharab or something, that the Israelis are helping set up in Rafah, I think it is, and in the south. And I imagine that they are, with full cooperation, they are getting food. But it just shows that picture.
They're getting no support.
Care. Yes, they don't care about the Palestinians.
From our Foreign Secretary. They're getting no support from our Foreign Secretary, who would sooner support an Islamist genocidal terrorist organisation who in their covenant founding charter calls for the destruction of the State of Israel and the Jewish people worldwide. Given half a chance, Hamas would then join forces with other Islamist terrorist organisations and destroy the West as well. 3 minutes left. I have to bring in the spiritual aspect to this argument as well, because this is a motive. It's very difficult to deal with. But with David Lammy continuing his rhetoric of hatred, his stepping up of sanctions against Israel, surely David Lammy and our nation now are on a collision course with the God of Israel, because it says in Genesis 12, 1-3, that I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. Surely David Lammy and also this government is leading this nation onto a direct collision course with the God of Israel, and that's dangerous.
Well, that's it. The word of God is very clear. I will bless those, as you've quoted it from Genesis 12, verse 3. I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you will be cursed. And because he's representing our government, he's bringing a curse upon the land. So you prayed it before we started the program, that his heart would be either changed and he starts being pro-Israel, pro the Bible, because he's a Bible believer. Read your Old Testament, I would say, and speak out what God puts in your heart, not this sort of opinion, but the truth. And we need to, as Christians, we need to be praying along those lines, because it's so important for us to have godly leadership. I mean, not everyone in our government is going to be God-fearing, but as a church, as a believer, we need to pray that those who are speaking and bringing a curse on our land, they either need to change rapidly or else they're removed. And the Lord is the one, Daniel chapter 2, he changes the times and the seasons. He brings up leaders and brings down leaders. He can do it. But we need to be united as Christians, praying in the right way. That's one of the bigger problems. We don't have a unity even amongst the body of Christ. And we need to be people of prayer, praying, God, show us, open our eyes, give us the spirit of discernment, so that at least we are seeing the truth and speaking out the truth to counter the lies that are coming out from our government. So it's a difficult time, but it's a time for praying, intercession. And
on those lines, with about a minute and a half to go, Melanie, show us how we should be praying, because the Bible describes Israel as the apple of God's eye. We see that Israel and the Jewish people are back in their land in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And we're finding that our nation under David Lammy is cursing Israel. And we know from history what happens when nations curse Israel. They end up being transferred to the rubbish bin of history. So within 30 seconds, Melanie, share with us how we need to be praying for our leaders, even if they are so hostile towards Israel, like David Lammy, because the spiritual state of our nation depends on it.
I think we have to repent deeply before the Lord and to ask him, in a way, to have mercy on those individual ministers, because, as like Alistair was saying, it's their eternal destiny as well as the nation's which is affected. And then we carry on praying for Israel, and we write to our MPs.
So Melanie and Alistair, thank you so much for a great job on Politics Today. Thank you, both of you. And I want to thank you for watching this programme. Our nation is in peril. The more our nation under David Lammy continues to attack Israel and continues to support Hamas, then this is dangerous for the spiritual health and well-being of our nation, but also for David Lammy himself. So let's call on him to repent and our nation to turn back to God at this critical time and to continue to being an ally to Israel in the Middle East. So thank you for watching this week's Politics Today.